Hey guys, Rudy here. It is December 23rd, and it is 9 degrees where I'm from in Louisiana, and it is cold as fuck. And I know there's people out there who are like, Rudy, that ain't shit. But I'm telling you, it's the shit when you're not used to it. Taking y'all with me on a little drive. I gotta go to Walmart to pick up some groceries. And it's like, Rudy, why didn't you do that before it got really cold? It's like, I don't know. I'm a dumb Mexican. And I woke up thinking about the stories I tell. And I'm very aware that they're anecdotal. So it's basically, you gotta take my word for it, right? And I think I was making a comment in a video, and I was like, I don't even know how to spell the word anecdotal. So I looked it up. And you know, when you Google something, it'll usually autocorrect the spelling. It'll just make an assumption of what you mean. So I've learned how to spell it that way really quick. That's how I usually learn how to spell words. It's just by Googling them the wrong way, and then, learning that way. So I won't look like a total moron. So I was looking at the definition, and there is a lot of negativity around the word anecdotal. And I don't know if it was like that before the big V, the 2020 thing, the 7-Eleven Part 2, the jab, China V, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if that definition was prevalent on Google search before that. It's basically almost like a put down. I'm going to put a screenshot of the definition. But it's something along the lines of, it's very, it uses a lot of kind of negative connotation, like a negative phrasing, like word of mouth, unreliable, stuff like that. Now I'll put a description up here because I'm kind of just going off the top of my head about it. And it was like, you know how you scroll down, it'll have more questions that other people have asked supposedly. And it was like, what is the difference between, this is a Google question that popped up. What is the difference between anecdotal evidence and empirical evidence? And I was like, okay, let me click on that. I'm kind of curious. I knew the definition already, but I wanted to see what Google had to say about it, because Google is God, right? So it's like, I want to know what Big Mama has to say. And it's like, the only difference I could really see is that empirical evidence, let's start with anecdotal. Anecdotal evidence is basically the equivalent of some redneck with a notepad writing down a story and retelling it. And empirical evidence is, that could be the same redneck, but he has a trench coat on and tells you, and puts it in a spreadsheet and makes a chart about it. That's empirical evidence. So to me, really, there's no difference, because either way, it's some asshole repeating a story. And I don't know though, because you guys tell me what you think. Just like Den Keeper Truth with his when he asked his audience, what does logic mean, and he wanted a real definition. And I gave him my silly little definition. That's just the way I am, because and someone put on their definition. It's really good. I like that. In more mathematical terms, what is logic, which is great. We need people like that to give us their point of view, even if it is system approved by the books kind of deal. I don't really mind that in a way. Like when I looked up the definition between anecdotal and empirical evidence, I want to know the difference, because it's always going to be, my stories are always going to be from my point of view, so it's always going to be anecdotal. And anecdotal evidence is still evidence. And you can say, I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson, that dude, that joker, Neil of the Grassfed Bison, was on a show talking about he was going to get selected for jury duty or something. And the reason he wasn't picked is because he pointed out that, in his mind, right, he didn't get picked because he pointed out that anecdotal evidence isn't reliable and word of mouth testimony isn't reliable, or something like that. And in his fucking twisted mind, that's the reason he didn't get picked. Which to me, that was just in his imagination. He doesn't really know the reason. And this is my point when it comes to these scientist assholes. They do not really, really know, but they pretend they know. You got a Neil of the Grassfed Bison going, I didn't get picked because I was the smartest man in the room. That's basically what he said. And I wish I could find the interview. I'm giving my anecdotal evidence right here, man, because it's word of mouth, right? Oh no, I'm a Trump supporter. He doesn't believe in the jab. Anyway, I'm just kidding around, guys. It's for fun. Like, when I make these videos, 9 times out of 10, it's to be funny or just poke fun of reality. And the most serious presentation I did was probably that quote "You are Kane" video, where I talked about myself. And even then, it's like talking about my past is it's so whatever to me now, because it's like it didn't happen. It's so weird, you guys, because when I think about what I went through with my brother, my half brother, what I went through with my half older brother and my mother and all the men in her life, it's almost like it didn't happen. It's the weirdest thing. It's like ever since I had my 2 spiritual experiences, it's like the past didn't matter, the future didn't matter. And once you get to that point, it's like you're walking on water. Because once you get over these past traumas, it's like they didn't happen, guys. It's like, golly, it's so hard to put into words. And I've heard other people tell me this. I've heard testimonies from, especially listening to Jesse Lee Peterson's radio show, because people call in there and they talk about their awakening, and it's like so amazing. It's just unbelievable. Like, people telling the same stories about their past traumas, and you just can't help go, oh man, everyone's going through the same thing. It's wild. Alright guys, I had to pause the video for a second because I had to get my order. Alright, I'm looking up, I'm just reading, I'll put screenshots up, guys. Anecdotal perspective. I looked up anecdotal perspective, which is what would be your perspective, right? When you tell a story, it's always going to be anecdotal according to the eggheads. Quote, based on or consisting of reports or observations of usually unscientific. So what makes it scientific? A guy with a lab coat talks about things, so it's not anecdotal anymore. I mean, if you want to split hairs, all evidence is anecdotal, no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's some asshole in a trench coat or some redneck in a barn. It's like, it doesn't. This is what blows my mind about it. And was it like this before 2020? Like, was that the definition, the literal definition? Al Roker announces huge move as he tells fans we had some great times. I guess Al Roker is I'm looking at Google News, guys. I guess Al Roker is retiring. Guy looks like hell. Is he just like a fucking body double now at this point? What happened to the jolly old black man I remember? Oh, of course. I'm reading off Google News, guys. This is totally just has nothing to do with what I originally want to talk about. Man fakes his entire life for a month with convincing AI-generated photos. Oh my god. I'm not clicking on that. Looking up the definition of empirical evidence. What is empirical evidence? People also ask, what is empirical evidence? Published January 5th, 2018. Empirical evidence is information that researchers generate to help uncover answers to questions that they can have significant implications for our society. Oh, really? Implications for our society. So, wow. There's a mouthful. I'm gonna look at this article. Maybe I need to do a screen recording. Yeah, we'll do a screen recording. I'm switching over. Stay tuned, guys. Alright guys, I read the article ahead of time just to make sure I wasn't wasting my time with it, and yeah, I'd be wasting my time going over that article. Maybe I'll go over something else later on in the next couple of weeks. But my bottom line was, it's all the same shit in my opinion. Empirical evidence, anecdotal evidence, it's all evidence. It's like, the only difference with empirical evidence is that the person observing the anecdotal evidence or the person given anecdotal evidence is wearing a trench coat or a fancy lab coat with a fancy education, and is putting information in a spreadsheet and getting a chart shown. All you got to do is show a chart and you'll seem like a genius. You're a genius. Like, what we observe is the most important thing, in my opinion. And I understand where the concern is. Anytime we involve human beings, we're liable to corruption of data, corruption of everything. So it's like when you're given anecdotal evidence, it's really easy to just kind of change something on the fly, or maybe even misremember something. That's the big one, right? Oh, you're just misremembering. Like the whole Neil deGrasse Tyson bit where I told you where he was in front of the lawyers or whatever, the prosecutors, and he said that he basically paraphrasing here, anecdotal evidence isn't reliable, human beings aren't reliable to give testimony, and they didn't pick him from that. From his point of view, from his dumbass, grass-fed bison ass, his point of view, that was the reason they didn't pick him. It could have been anything else. This is what I mean by stupid human beings, because he's one of them. Like, his dumbass doesn't realize that what he assumes in his little mind may not be true at all. And it blows my mind that we put people like that on a pedestal when they're just dumb humans like me and you in this monkey body. We're spirits, right? I'm not trying to put people down. I'm just saying we're fallible because of the bodies we've been placed in. But it's for a reason. It's almost like a bottleneck, an on-purpose bottleneck to show, to go through the trial. We're going to put you in this very limited body, and you can only think one word at a time with your frontal lobe monkey brain. You can only think one thought at a time, thought after thought after thought, and you can't. That's the best you got. And to me, it's a bottleneck on purpose. It's been talked about before that language is a bottleneck, and it totally is, especially English, because I've heard, I don't actually know. I would love maybe taking some time to learn another language like Japanese, because I heard that the more Asian languages are able to think almost in a meta kind of way, because their language infers different things at different times. You can infer different emotions at the same time with their language. Supposedly, I don't really know. That's what I've heard. And to be honest, I don't believe it. Is that I think all languages are meant to bottleneck. It's a Tower of Babel story. Again, with these Bible stories where it's like, these Bible stories are trying to tell you something. My coworker, Karina, she's talked about what she thinks about the Tower of Babel, and I'm starting to agree with her, because I never really gave it much thought. I mean, her and I are on the same page when it comes to the Tower of Babel. Like God, you had a race of humans probably getting close, a little too close to the sun, right? The sun, you can equate it as Ra or God. Maybe that's a metaphor, but getting a little too close, getting a little bit too big for their britches. You can just take the tower part out. Like the tower thing is just a metaphor for what human beings can become. And maybe, like I said, get a little bit too big for their britches. They're trying to be gods. So what do? You look at your people, you look at your children, and you go, you're not learning the right lesson. And this is God, so he knows more than we do. It doesn't matter if you think he's a monster, or maybe like he should have did it this way. It doesn't matter what you fucking think. So it's like, because you're limited in your little human monkey brain. And I'm not saying that to put you down. I'm not saying to put anyone down. It's just a matter of fact. Just accept it. I accept it. It's fine. It doesn't hurt my feelings. But he looks at his children and goes, y'all are out of control. He's from the South. Y'all are a little out of control. I'm gonna separate y'all. You're gonna have to learn different languages and be separate for a little while and learn on your own, and maybe eventually you can become one again. It's like, and I see it every day, like where I work, because we got a lot of Central Americans in this area. Not a lot, but a good amount of Central Americans in the area. And the store I work at is the only store that's open 24 hours in like a 10-mile radius. So I see all kinds of people coming through. Mostly Caucasian black, but at least once a day I'm going to see some Hondurans or some Haitians come through, Central Americans come through. And Karina's from Mexico, so she understands Spanish, the language from Mexico. And I can pick it up too. And I swear, when these dudes talk, those Guatemalans talk, and I know they're from Guatemala because they said so. They're nice people, I'm not putting them down. But as soon as they start talking in their native language, I can't understand a goddamn word they're saying. Now, I understand Spanish to a better extent than a normal person. I can at least go, they're speaking Spanish or they're speaking Portuguese. I don't know what language they're speaking. It's Spanish, but it's like some weird dialect. And that's what I think the Tower of Babel story is. It's like God had to give people all these different languages to keep them separated. And I know I'm not making sense. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I know there's something to it. And when Karina talks about it, she's on the edge. Like, I'm going to get her to talk about it more because she says interesting things about it. She's on the edge of, like, understanding what the Tower of Babel story meant. Because there's something to it. There's something to it that God had to separate these races. So maybe I'll go back in Genesis and read it, because I don't really remember it, verbatim. Anyway, I'm home, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great morning and stay warm.
I spent a lot of time in school, not living in the same place long enough to be tracked by the jury duty people, or whatever is the agency that calls you for jury duty. I finally got called. Proud to serve. At the time, I was teaching at Princeton in the astrophysics department. In fact, a seminar on, the evaluation of evidence and what that meant. So I'm there, and they get to the Q&A part. Okay? Any lawyers in the house? What do we call the Q&A part? Has some other name that obscures it. What is it, sir? Voir dire. You could have just called it Q&A, but you didn't, because you want people to think that what you're doing is complicated. You should take cues from the astrophysicists. What do we call spots on the sun? Sunspots, thank you, okay? What do we call big red stars? Red giants. Regions of space, you fall in, you don't come out, light does a black hole. Origin of space-time, Big Bang. We are simple people in astrophysics. The universe is complex enough. I'm not gonna lay down a lexicon so you think what we're doing is more complex than it actually is. The voir dire part. The lawyer asks me, I see you're an astrophysicist. What is that? And everybody's listening. I'm there eager to serve. And I say, well, so you take the laws of physics as discovered on Earth, apply them to the cosmos. It's okay. And I say, it says here you teach at Princeton. What do you teach? I said, well, I teach a course on the evaluation of evidence and the relative unreliability of eyewitness testimony. And I was out. I was on the street 5 minutes after that. They didn't want to hear that I understood how to evaluate evidence. I was gone until the second time. 3 years later, I said, okay, I'm not going to tell them about this class. So what happens? I go in there. I make it to the top 15. They're taking it down to 12. I made the first cut. So we're all squeezed into the box, and there's a couple of extra chairs next to it. And the defendant is there, sitting right there, with the lawyer and the judge. And I forgot what this part is called, sir. I don't know what it's called, but the judge reads the facts of the case. Maybe there's another French word for that. Okay. Once again, voir dire. All right. So I'm there. The judge reads the facts of the case. The defendant was found in Upper Manhattan in possession of 2,000 milligrams of cocaine. This is undeniable. We are trying him for the possession of those drugs. And I'm there, and by the way, there's a maid, a janitor. These are regular people in the real world up there with me among the 15. And I listen, and the judge says, well, do you have any questions about the facts of the case? Do you understand them as I've read them? I said, I got a question, sir. Why did you read the cocaine possession the way you did? What do you mean? I said, you said he had 2,000 milligrams of cocaine. That's 2 grams. The milligram is 1,000 divided by the 1,000 is 2 grams. Less than the weight of a penny. Why, sir, did you say it just that way? And then he looked at it, oh, that's just because that's how it's written here. He didn't know what he was reading. He didn't understand what he was reading. And so there I am, and I said, because it sounds like you're making the possession sound worse than it actually was. I'm concerned about that. There I was, back out on the street again. The fun part of that one was, I think I contaminated the entire jury. All right? So...
Was that anecdotal evidence, dude? I don't know. You tell me.